Hey everyone, it's Smitha. Today I'm really excited because we're going to be doing a video where we look at 3 different palettes from 3 different brands and do multiple looks with them. And I'm really excited because these palettes are all on the more colorful side. We have a palette from Odin's Eye, one from Viseart, and one from Wicked Widow. I'm going to be doing detailed overhead swatches of each palette and looks. And I do have a discount affiliate code with each brand, so I'm going to go ahead and pop those up on the screen now. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, the first palette I have is called Mystic Gleam. This is a brand new palette from Odin's Eye that's launching on June 18th. This is a 15 pan palette and it retails for about $35 before using a discount code. Really beautiful color story. I have to say, probably one of my favorites from the brand. I really love the rich jewel tones and the fact that there's so many deeper mattes to choose from in this palette. And the second palette that Odin's Eye is launching is called Luminous Shadows. Here's what it looks like swatched. I think this is also a really beautiful color story. I'm not going to be trying this one on in my video, but if you gravitate to more warmer tones and neutrals, pinks, and purples, then this color story might be more for you. All right, and the next palette we have is from Viseart. This is Violette Lumiere. And I know Viseart has done palettes like this before where you have kind of a half neutral, half colorful color story. But I have to say, I was really excited about this one. I love the shimmer to matte ratio. It's basically like 50-50. And I love that these purples lean a little bit cooler toned. There's so much that I love about the Viseart formula, in particular the mattes, and I've talked about how over time the shimmer formula has truly stepped up to the point where I really look forward to using the shimmers in their palettes now. As you can see, you have a rich jewel tone purple, you have a kind of like purple, blue, brown duochrome, and a couple of shimmers that are a little bit more topper-like. And here's what the whole palette looks like swatched my arm. The one thing I would change about some of the Viseart color stories is I would love to have a little less beige, especially when it comes to the mattes, because I tend to just not use those as much as the other mattes in the palette. And sometimes I don't use them at all. The third and final palette I'm going to be looking at in this video is Wicked Widow's new palette called Clairvoyant. And here's what the inside of the palette looks like. This is basically a pastel palette with a pop of gray. I have to say the gray matte in here really entices me and it goes really well with the tones of the pastels in here. It's kind of an interesting take on when there's a black added to a palette. I just feel like this gray can be so useful when used with the other mattes in the palette. The shimmers in here are smooth and high impact. I believe that there's one multi-chrome. I think the others are duochromes. I definitely think that this is the type of shimmer formula that will work for a wide variety of skin types because it's smoother, but I love that they're still incredibly sparkly. And here is what the whole palette looks like swatched to my arm. Definitely like that we're seeing a very different color story from Wicked Widow because I feel like they're known for doing a lot of deep, moody, grungy color stories, which I love, but it's also nice to have something a little bit different. All right, and the first palette I'm going to dip into is this jewel toned Dream from Odin's Eye. I just love this color story. I think it probably is one of my favorite color stories from the brand. And of course, I'm so happy how many deep mattes that we have in here. But we do have a few lighter mattes too to just build some contrast. So I'm going to start off with this kind of rich green shade here. And I'm just going to place that on the inner portion of the lid. I think I'm going to do the same look on both eyes. I'm just feeling like incorporating as many shades as I can into the look because I just love this color story. And I feel like a lot of people have been waiting for a palette release from the brand. So I am happy that this release is focused on palettes. I do find these mattes to be buildable, so you don't get full pigmentation right out of the gate. They are pretty pigmented, but you do require some building to get them to kind of a fuller opacity. I've been using the Danessa Myricks Color Fix Nude in the shade 4 quite a bit as an eye primer, and I have to say I really like it. It does cancel out some of the hyperpigmentation on my lid, and it just allows colors to pop a little bit more. All right, and the matte that I'm most excited about in this palette, of course, is this kind of blue-purple shade that we have here. So I'm going to use that in the outer corner of the lid. I do think I'm going to use that navy as well, just to like really deepen up that outer corner. But this is a beautiful shade. And so far, so good. And I'm just leaving some bare space on the middle of the lid where I'm going to pop my shimmer. All right, I really like how this matte is performing. I'm just going to take a little bit and deepen up the outer portion of the lid just to build a little bit of depth. All right, and this is where we're at. Now I'm going to dip into this navy blue matte here, and I'm just going to use this to deepen up a little bit in the outer portion of the lid, just on the outermost portion here. All right, and I really do want to dip into this grungy green matte here. I'm just going to take a little bit and add that to the inner portion of the lower lash line. Now I'm gonna dip into this kind of slate gray here and just blend it into that kind of blue purple matte that I put down earlier. I wasn't kidding when I said I wanted to use a lot of the shades in this palette. And I'm just dragging that down below the lower lash line as well. Dipping back in with that navy blue matte and just adding a little bit along the outer portion of the lower lash line. All right, and the last matte I think I'm going to use is this pastel blue matte here. Taking some on a smaller brush and adding that just as a kind of inner corner highlight. And then I'm going to use that right under the brow bone. All right, of course, now we have to add some shimmer. I always have trouble deciding which shimmers I want to use, but I'm going to start off with this kind of mint toned green here. Here's what it looks like on my fingertip. And I'm just going to add a little bit on the inner portion of the lid. And then I'm going to dip in with the shade here, which I'm pretty sure is a multi-chrome. Here's what it looks like on my fingertip. Just going to put that on the mid to outer portion. That is beautiful. Right, now I'm going to dip into this kind of marbled shade here. And I'm going to put a little bit on the brow bone. And just a little bit on the inner corner. And here is my first completed look. All right, and now that I've done some swatches and a look with Mystic Gleam, I want to close up with some wrap-up thoughts. I have to say, I genuinely think that this is my favorite color story that Odin's Eye has done, or if it's not my favorite, it's really high up there. I also am really happy to see that this palette is the price point that it is. It's 15 pans. It's, I want to say it's like $35 or $36. I don't think there's a bunch of multi-chromes in here. I do think there's at least one. This shade here that I wore on my lids, I'm pretty sure is a multi-chrome, but I thought everything performed really well, and I love the look that I came up with. So yes, very happy with this palette, and I just think that, you know, there is nothing that I would change about this color story. And I often feel like there's some notes that I have about what I would change with the color story. I really don't. If I was being super nitpicky, I would have loved to have an iridescent shade. But I still thought that this marbled shade here that has multicolored sparkles worked really beautifully as a highlighting shade. I think it was perfect as a highlighting shade. And I know I didn't have a chance to play with this palette, but I do think it's really pretty. It's just that the Mystic Gleam palette is really the one that spoke to me most. All right, and the next palette I'm going to dip into is this purple palette from Viseart. This is called Violette Lumiere. And I have to say, I am so happy that there are so many shimmers in this palette. I've talked about how I've really been enjoying the shimmer formula from Viseart. I think I want to do a purple smoky eye. So I'm going to start off with this shade here and use that as sort of like, I'm going to use that as my base shade all over the lid. And something that I've mentioned many, many times before is that although I feel like the shimmers have gotten better over time, the mattes have always been really good and one of my favorite matte formulas in general. Taking a little bit of that same shade and dusting it along the lower lash line as well. And I also want to mention a lot of these mattes have a purple undertone, which I really appreciate as well. I'm going to go in with this shade here and start to deepen up that outer corner. Also, like, you know, Viseart has done a lot of purple leaning palettes before, but in general, I would say they tend to be a lot warmer than this one. So I like that this one has some good depth to it and also some coolness to it that you don't always get with purple palettes from Viseart. And I'm also going to work some of that same matte onto the lower lash line. All right, and now I'm going to dip into this deepest matte here. This is a beautiful, really rich, kind of eggplant toned purple. I'm just going to use that to really smoke out that outer corner. And I love that they included a pastel purple in here. I'm going to use this as my brightening up shade on the inner corner and on the brow bone. So just going to take a little bit on this smaller brush and add that right into the inner corner. I really love how the tones of all of these purples just go so well together. All right, and I actually really like how these mattes are looking just like this without putting that pastel on the brow bone. So I think I'm just going to leave things where they're at. Of course, having trouble picking what shimmers I want to use, I think I'm going to use two, and I will swatch them. So the first one is this pan here. This one looks like a duochrome to me. I'm going to swatch it on the back of my hand. Yeah, and it has this beautiful kind of sheerness to it as well. It has quite a smooth texture. I'm just going to put this on the inner portion of the lid. All right, and then the second shade I'm going to dip into is this kind of like blue purple duochrome, blue purple brown duochrome. Here's what it looks like on my fingertip. I love shades like these. Oh yeah. Most stunning shimmer in the palette for sure. And I'm just going to put that on the rest of the lid and blend it into those deeper mattes. And I am going to use a highlighting shimmer as well. I think I'm going to go in with this one here. We'll swatch it. Here's what it looks like on my fingertip. Swatch it next to the other kind of sheer shimmer. I feel like this one has a little bit more blue in it than the other sheer shimmer that I swatched and tried on earlier. So I'm going to put this on my brow bone. And maybe just the tiniest bit on the inner corner. And here is the second completed look. All right, now that I've had a chance to do some detailed swatches and a look with this palette, I want to close up with some wrap-up thoughts. Honestly, I had way more fun using this palette than I expected. I feel like, you know, we've seen palettes like this before, but to me, this feels like the most purple palette that they've done. And I love, like I said, that this leans a little bit cooler toned than their other purple palettes that I've tried. They often have, you know, some quite warm tones of purple, which I don't mind, but I love that this one is not only cooler toned, but you have some beautiful depth to it. The shimmers perform beautifully. The mattes, no surprises there because, like I said, their matte formula is in one of my top favorites. I love also that they've been doing palettes in this size. They used to do ones that were twice the size and twice the price. So these do make trying their formula a little bit more accessible. And honestly, it's just hard to pan eyeshadow in general. So I feel like that's just better for everyone in general. Viseart may not always do the most exciting palettes, but their quality is just always there. And I gotta say, I think that this is probably in my top 3 palettes that I have from the brand. So really, really had a great time using this, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on this. All right, and the third and final palette I'm going to dip into is from Wicked Widow Beauty, and this is the Clairvoyant palette. There's actually a lot of colors that I want to use in here, and I was super inspired by one of Freya's looks. I'm going to pop it up on the screen so you can see. I'm going to recreate her look and then do a different look on the other eye. So I'm just curious also like how that kind of look would look on me, because obviously we have very different skin tones, but she did this beautiful halo eye. I think she used this gray as the outer halo mixed in with this purple. So let's go ahead and start off with the shade Supernatural. I'm just going to start to put down some of that gray matte. And I'm sure that most of you are following Freya, but if you don't, highly recommend checking out her page because she does so many beautiful alternative editorial looks. So I'm just taking that matte and I'm putting it on the inner portion of the lid and the outer portion of the lid. And I have to say, these are absolutely beautiful mattes. This formula is performing really, really beautifully. Pigmented, but super blendable. All right, I already love how that looks by itself. This gray actually has a little bit of a purple tone to it. I don't know if she used that purple or not, but I'm gonna go ahead and use it myself. So I'm just taking a little bit of a smaller brush and I'm going to kind of just work in this purple as well. I really like the addition of the gray matte to this palette. I felt like it was unexpected and it just kind of worked. And now I'm just dipping in again with that gray matte and I'm going to just blend out. Because I do want the purple just to be adding a little bit of dimension. Now I'm going to dip into this shade Intuition, which is a pastel green, and just put it all over the inner portion of the lid, kind of in between where I set down the gray and the purple. And I'm going to work that all the way up. Now on me, the tone of this green definitely looks different than it does on Freya, and that's, you know, everything to do with color theory because of our skin tone differences. And then I'm just going to take that same shade and put it on the lower lash line in between the gray and purple mattes. And Freya actually did take this down quite a ways. I normally don't take shadow down that far, but because I'm trying to recreate her look, I'm going to give it a go. And then she put a little bit of that green matte out here as well. All right, and for the shimmer, I'm pretty sure she just used this kind of pastel green here. It's called Moonlight. Here's what it looks like on my fingertip. I'm going to go ahead and add that right to the center of the lid. Oh, that's a pretty shimmer. Here is the first completed look. All right, and for my second look, I want to do something a little bit more warm toned. So I'm going to start off with this yellow matte here called Veil. And I'm just going to do somewhat of a gradient eye. Just placing that on the inner portion. And I have to say, I'm really excited that there's a yellow shimmer in here as well. I am going to be filming a yellow chrome video very soon because they're hard to come by, and I've had a few newer yellow chromes come into my life. Now I'm going in with that orange matte, that pastel orange matte called Oracle, and I'm just creating a gradient. I'm excited that Wicked Widow is playing around with some different tones for this palette. I feel like they're known for doing deep, grungy, moody color stories, and it's fun to see them play around with different tones, but then still have that pop of gray that just gives them still a little bit of extra moodiness, even in a pastel palette. Now I'm going in with that pink matte called Perspective. And in the outer corner, I'm going to use the shade Mystic, which is the deeper of the two purples, just because I feel like I do need a little bit of extra depth. Right, and I added those same shades that I used on the top to the lower lash line as well. Now I'm going to dip in with my shimmers. I think I'm going to use this yellow shimmer here and the pink one. I feel like those two will go well together. And they're the warm tone shimmers in the palette. So I'm going to go in with this beautiful yellow chrome that has an orange red shift, and just add that on the inner portion of the lid. And now I'm going to use this pink shimmer called Divine and place that on the outermost portion of the lid. And then I think just in the outermost corner, I'm just going to add a little bit of the gray matte to just add a little bit of moodiness and smokiness to the look. I'm just going to add that same shade to the upper and lower lash line. All right, and here is the fourth and final look. And both of my looks using the Wicked Widow Clairvoyant palette. All right, now that I've had a chance to do some detailed swatches and 2 looks using the Wicked Widow Clairvoyant palette, I want to finish up with some wrap-up thoughts. I had a lot of fun using this palette as well. I feel like all of these palettes today were hits for me. In terms of the performance, I think everything performed really well. It's been a little while since I've played around with a Wicked Widow palette. Something that you can really depend on with the shimmers is that they're smooth. I do find them to be beginner friendly, user friendly, and the type that I think will work on a wide range of skin types. And, you know, the mattes all performed really well, and that's not something you can say about all pastel mattes. As I mentioned, I really like the inclusion of this gray matte. I feel like I would incorporate it probably into almost every look that I do with this palette. I just find it to be very versatile, and it goes with the pastel tones in this palette really well. I feel like whether you gravitate to this palette or not will depend on how you feel about pastels, really. But this was a playful and fun palette and had a little hint of moodiness to it, so really enjoyed playing with this one. All right, I know we did a bit of a longer video today, but I would love to hear what you think both of this style of video and what you think about these palettes, which color story speaks to you the most. If you made it to the end of the video, I would absolutely love it if you left me a palette emoji. And even if you're not in the market for buying a new palette, I hope this inspires you to take out some of your own palettes and play with color. When it comes down to it, that is the best part about makeup, is playing and being creative. As always, I really hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.